Okay, hello, Dr.
Hi.
Marcus Watson. Thank you so much. It's 2025 and we are meeting in real time after connecting 3 years ago. And so I really appreciate your time today. And for anyone listening, I'd like to start by asking Dr. Marcus Watson to just tell us some background about yourself. What's your field of study? Where you're from? And
All right, here we
anything you
go.
like.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. Appreciate it.
Mhm.
My name is Dr. Marcus Du Bois Watson.
Mhm.
Uh, as you can hear from the names, um, I'm named for Marcus Garvey and W.E.B. Du Bois.
Mhm.
Okay. Um,
Beautiful.
yes, I come from biracial parentage. Okay.
Mhm.
I'm 52 years old. So, what
Okay.
that should mean to you is that I'm from a generation where uh, black father, black mother, black child, black father, white mother, black child, white father, black mother, black child, and so forth. So I grew up 100% black consciousness. As
Mhm.
again, as you can see through my names, my older brother Malcolm. I'll just leave it at
Oh.
that. Okay. Um, okay. So born and grew up in Buffalo, New York.
Mhm.
Uh, Big Buffalo Bills fan. Um,
Oh.
yes, I grew up. I grew up with movement being vitally important to who I am.
Mhm.
Running, I feel like I just ran from my mother's womb, and I've been running ever since. And not in the Sam Cooke running away from. There's some of that. I mean the enjoyment of
Moving,
of
movement.
moving, the physicality of moving, sports,
Mhm.
hip hop,
Mhm.
dancing. I was in a hip hop dance group. Um,
Oh, wow.
Middle school and high school, just here local in Buffalo. Got paid,
Mm.
some chump change to do some performances at area clubs and so forth. Um,
Mhm.
and I think that's important because when we talk about writing, I wasn't doing a whole lot of that
Mhm.
growing
It's,
up.
it sounds like you were feeling when I heard you talking about moving and the running, it was also like a
Yes,
feeling of freedom to it. Yes. Yes.
yes. That's what life was to me. It was movement. I didn't know about
Mhm.
anything else. And uh, you might not think so when you understand my parents. My father is a PhD in political science. My
Mhm.
mother has a master's degree, I think it's in business. And in other words, they went through schooling.
Mhm.
They got those degrees. And I think
Yeah.
if you saw my brother, he's what you would have thought would have come from that in terms of a stone cold intellect. But I just came out running, you know. I just came out running, and it took me quite a long time to kind of get back to those kinds of intellectual writing types of things, even to the point where my first semester in college, I went to Brockport, outside of near Rochester. Uh, I had to take remedial courses in
Mm.
reading, writing, and mathematics. I was just doing something else in high school, and
Got you.
and that had to do with socializing in various ways, and so I had
Mhm.
a lot of catching up to do when it came to writing, and that puts me in a certain relationship with writing.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
so what else
Yes.
about me? I end up double majoring in history and political science. What I
Mhm.
really wanted to do was Africana studies or Black studies. I just didn't know it existed. Even like today, it's not a discipline that is highly publicized. It's not well resourced.
Right.
It's sort of segregated away on college campuses. So I did history and political science for the sole purpose of seeing what of blackness could I extract from them.
Right, which I would imagine also flowed from the names that you were given. You probably also, I don't know, consciously or unconsciously, you have these names. So of
Yeah.
course you want you want to study history and political science. But so for anyone listening, because you're so it's so true what you're saying. I think most people don't uh, in the past or now head off to college with the idea I'm going to major in Africana studies, right? Because it's not something that's on the, it's not something that a lot of students would probably even know existed, as you said. So for anybody listening, like what do you, how could you, what is Africana studies? Could you say a
Yeah.
little bit? Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Africana. I'm now the coordinator of Africana Studies at
Congratulations.
thank you, at Buffalo State University.
Hmm.
So we want to understand Africana Studies as a multidisciplinary field that's interested in restoring the cosmos through deep African thought. Okay.
Hmm.
When we say cosmos, we mean this world of interconnectedness uh,
Hmm.
among all humans of any background, but also between humanity and the universe, right? And with the idea that we're here to be responsible for caring for each other and the earth and all that's created in it in a kind of delicate balance, right? So in Africana studies, we're interested in what broke the cosmos. If you think about it now,
Hmm.
there's too much in the news and in life that has to do with division and
Hmm.
hierarchy and distrust,
Yeah.
hatred and violence, and so we
Yeah.
want to our expertise is in understanding what broke the cosmos. Secondly, what is our current condition? It can be locally, nationally, globally. And then what measures need to be taken to restore the cosmos? So that's
Okay.
Africana studies in a nutshell.
Okay, you did a great job. I was like, I've just asked him to do something that people teach whole classes on, but you did a great job of just like, succinctly sharing with anybody who might be unfamiliar with it, um, which is a great segue to where I wanted to go next. Um, and for everybody listening, this is unscripted. We're doing this in real time. I'm learning about him also as he's giving me these answers.
Mhm.
So I noticed that in the 2022 article that brought me to you, that was published in the Journal of Black Psychology, it's called Half Connecting Theory: Developing African Psychology Theory in a Radical Beginning Direction. And just now you were talking about as you were explaining what is Africana studies, I noticed that you touched on like this radical beginnings because you said we're interested in going back in Africana studies and trying to understand what broke the cosmos. And so I think it's a good segue as to kind of asking you um, to talk about this half connecting theory. What does it explain about us as humans, our human development, for people just learning about your half connected theory and how you're relating it to radical beginnings. What does it explain about us as humans?
Thank you. It's as you know, and thank you for reading it and reaching out to me those years ago to say that you appreciated it.
Yes, it's wonderful.
Thank you. Yeah. As I said in the lead up to this conversation we're having, you've been a bright light to me ever since
Thank you.
you emailed me, to just say you appreciated it because we're scholars, we're thinking, we're trying to come up with ideas uh, for for folks like us. I want to assume the work matters a lot because it is. We're doing it with our elders and ancestors in mind, and we're trying to address serious issues
Mhm.
that we have as Black folks here and globally. So um, yeah, it meant a lot to me that you sent that. So in terms of half connecting theory, it is a an African centered psychology theory or an African psychology theory. And
Mhm.
what it proposes to do is to essentially take super insightful observations made by uh, uh, scholars of African psychology and make them more relevant and applicable to understanding the minutia of everyday life, right? So,
Mhm.
when I'm reading works of African psychology, I'm um, I'm overwhelmed with excitement. It's feeding my spirit, talking about, for example, the African worldview, which is essentially a cosmos worldview. This idea that ancestrally we lived out the meaning of cosmos on the African continent, and arguably in some ways still today here in the Caribbean and so forth. But that we lived out the idea of uh, being at one and at peace with each other and the universe, not in an over idealized fashion, but philosophically.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah.
uh, and then what happened to that? How did we get torn with all due speed by the millions from that kind of cultural cosmos lifestyle,
Mhm.
dragged like animals across the Atlantic and forced to work, for free to uh, create this a massive and obnoxious, let me say, an obnoxious amount of wealth for whites. Uh, so I'm reading that and I'm saying, okay, I like that, I like that, I like that. But I wanted to, there were circumstances that made me ask, okay, fine. But what has that got to do with everyday things like a pen
Mhm.
or a cup or a parking space or sports like football or basketball,
Mhm.
or international projects like development projects where uh, groups of Americans or people from Britain or Australia, they go around the world to so-called less developed countries trying to help them in this or that way. What do those amazing ideas have to do with those kinds of everyday realities? So half connecting theory uh, comes in there, right? To add to what African psychology scholarship has produced.
Okay. So you were trying to figure so you were trying to or you were writing this so that we, the readers, the consumers of it,
Mhm.
could go back to radical beginnings in terms of worldview. And then you were wanting us to, I guess, take a look at what's happening around us even today and kind of see some of the connections, or is it more to say we're disconnected from the radical beginnings?
Yeah, it's to I wanted to um, provide a prescriptive lens for
Okay.
us to see um, who we are,
Okay.
become, and if what we've become is healthy, y- you know,
Absolutely.
from a psychology perspective. Because I think the there are a lot of things in our lives, in our current uh, so-called culture, that are very powerful and influential, and they can have us thinking that things that are actually bad for our mental health and physical health and spiritual health are good for us, right? And
Ah.
yeah, and
Mm.
what do we call that in democratic sanity, right?
Mhm.
Democratic sanity is
Mhm.
a concept in African psychology, and you can hear it in the words democratic meaning majority, and sanity
Mhm.
having to do with health. So it's the idea, it's a criticism of the way Eurocentric societies tend to work, which is if the majority of people are doing it, then let's go with it. It's good.
Yeah.
And the problem,
Okay. So I like how this conversation is organically flowing because
I'm trying to,
I remember what stood out when I read your article the first time because I've read it several times now. It was when you started to talk about the technologies,
mhm,
and earlier you referred to it made you think about a cup or a pen. It just
yeah,
examples you tossed out, but you also talked about technologies and how even buildings are constructed,
yes,
and they are constructed by humans who have a worldview, and so their worldview, their belief systems show up even in what we create,
yes,
what we design.
yeah,
And so I'll segue to talking about, of course, use of the internet, smartphones, and right now, what's on everybody's mind, the rapid, right, explosion, proliferation of artificial intelligence. And so I would love to get some information from you in terms of your thoughts on how it's being used.
mhm,
Is it good for us? You said some things can be presented to us as though they're good, but they might not be healthy for us.
yeah,
Um, and I'm thinking about, I think this was an Australian uh, teenager who, through my perceptual lens, would not have been a white identified person, but that's my U.S. American
right,
brain. But I don't know how the mother and the son identified, but I know they were living in Australia. And 60 Minutes did an expose on this 14-year-old who died of suicide
mm,
because he fell in love with an AI girlfriend,
mm,
which was really just a artificial creation.
right,
But he fell in love with this female presenting AI girlfriend.
mm,
And in order to be with her, he thought he had to kill himself because he couldn't. I don't know where I don't know the cognition other than this was a teenager.
right,
And he had isolated himself from physical contact with folks. The mother couldn't reach him, and he was talking to this AI girlfriend every day, very romantic language, et cetera, et cetera.
mm.
And yeah, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on how we should relate, how we could relate half connect theory to these types of experiences we're now having.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you for that prompt. I think let me start with something that might sound like it's not right on point, but I'm going to get there. Uh,
Okay.
okay, my PhD is in anthropology,
Okay.
with an emphasis on psychological anthropology, and
Mhm.
particularly psychoanalytic anthropology. And that had me living in South Africa for 5 years,
Mhm.
especially in the Limpopo province. So while I'm there, I'm in the rural areas, and I would notice this kind of thing that I'm about to say multiple times. You might imagine over 5 years. Um, a pregnant mother, one of her children who's already born, maybe 3 to 5 years old, will come and say, "What's in there?" And the mother
Mhm.
will look very carefully over that child and say, "Porridge."
Mhm.
Right? But if that same child were to come and say, "Mommy, I've been talking to people. I know there's like a little me in there, a little," that same mother would look over that child, realize that that child is coming with something, and then give the child the rest of the reality. Okay. In the
Okay.
first case, the mother, um, is seeing that the child's not ready for that knowledge. That
Mhm.
child just came with an open-ended question, has no clue, no idea, nothing in that child's life
Mhm.
gave him or her that an experience that could make him or her come with information that the mother could say, okay, you know this much, let me take you the rest of the way. That second child came with that experience, out and about, talking to friends or whatever, and somehow came with that understanding. So I say that to say, I think one way to try to understand, for me, with half connecting as kind of the framework, um, digital technology, social media, AI, and so forth, is that from that African centered cultural understanding of how we should learn and at what
Mhm.
pace we should learn, those technologies just dump information onto our young ones without regard to the developmental stage or maturity level of our young ones.
Mhm.
They are exposed to um, they're exposed to things in life that uh, arguably they're not ready for in terms of their
Mhm.
psychological development.
Absolutely.
They're inundated with these things.
Absolutely.
It's like the image of a tree with a very skinny trunk, but
Mhm.
it's burdened somehow with branches and leaves and fruits that have grown way beyond proportion,
Mhm.
to the trunk, and it's a heavy burden to carry.
Yes.
It's a heavy burden for a young developing uh, ego or psychology to carry. So in
Mhm.
general, I think that's what's happening with our digital age. Um,
Mhm.
and that's a problem for mental health, right? I mean, imagine this. I think about it like, if I am seeing all of these images and sights and sounds, and I'm 5 years old and 7 years old and 9 years old, and I haven't even had a chance to naturally and organically and beautifully grow and strengthen my ego,
Mhm.
I might not even, when I'm looking at it, I might not even know where I belong in all that. I might lose
Yeah.
myself in all that.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so I think in some way that's what we are seeing, with the anxiety, unfortunately, and the depression, and as you sort of alluded to, the existential crises. Um,
Mhm.
I think that right there, I think we can all agree that this is a I don't know if that's a kind of pandemic, a psychological pandemic we're going through. Many of us,
Mhm.
maybe some people
Mhm.
who even watch this, that shows you right there something's off.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
unless we take those kinds of conditions as normal. But I think, speaking for me personally,
Mhm.
and for I think in some regard generations past, there's a way to live that's not that doesn't have to be like that and feel like that. y- you know um,
Yeah. I agree. I mean, I I think, like I want to, let's see. I want to see if I can, because I think you may have said it earlier, but I want to go back to it just
yeah, please.
before we wrap up. I think you alluded to it earlier, but what had you noticed was missing in the writings in African psychology? Was there something that you noticed, you know, we weren't talking about with depth around worldview. Because I remember in your paper you were saying that, yeah, you often read about worldviews. Like that's a common discussion in African-centered psychology. But what what were you wanting to see more of, like that sparked
Well,
your paper?
yeah, yes, and uh, I'll preface it by saying uh, the insights that I think that came to me came from doing ethnographic research. So I'm on the ground, in South Africa for more than 2 years. I was there for 5 years total, but 2 of those years was doing. So when I'm on the ground, real people doing it, that kind of is what inspired me. And one of the things that inspired me was that I think was missing or under theorized was the
Mm-hmm.
role of the body, was
Hmm.
the role of the human body and movement in worldviews. Now, the scholarship would talk about the mind and the body are one and things like that, but
Yes.
I didn't see the scholars then talk about the body as a
Mm-hmm.
site where worldviews would be embedded and play out in the everyday humdrum of living, And so I started noticing that this goes back to my research in South Africa that involved basically uh, people in our country we would say are white who came from the United States, Ireland, Australia, uh, coming to so-called help African people speaking the Tsonga and Pedi languages. And so in my study, I was looking at their everyday interactions, just how they spoke to each other and this and that. But
Mm-hmm.
I recorded not just what they said to each other, but also the way their bodies moved, just beneath the surface of their spoken words. And so that's when it came to me that there are patterns to these body movements, and they reflected the African worldview for the Tsonga and Pedi speakers, and the European worldview for these, European helpers. And so,
Mm-hmm.
for example, the, uh, uh, the Africans in my study, in the way they moved, they tended to move in a way that invited connection. They wanted people to come closer, and specifically into relationships of obligation. It could be uh, soft handshakes. It can be uh, interlinking fingers as they're talking at angles. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also in the way mothers and older sisters would carry babies on their backs. That closeness. On the other hand, without exception, the the European helpers, their bodies, and of course this is subconscious and embodied, but their bodies seemed expert at holding people at a distance from themselves, reflecting the self-other division that that we associate with the European worldview. So for example, uh, they they would shake hands very hard. They would square up with each other
Mm-hmm.
and with the Africans with whom they were interacting, and they would do these hard handshakes, like I'm a person and I'm here, and you're a person and you're there, and there's this line, this felt line between us, and
And like a tension.
yeah,
Tension. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Like I gotta
Yeah.
stay here. It's like a stiff arm almost. Like, hey, you stay there, I'm here. And then
Mm-hmm.
and then we can interact. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And as they're doing that, the eye contact is constant and ceaseless. And the eyes are doing the same thing up here as what the hand and the facing off are doing down here. And so it produced this felt line
Mm.
between self and others. So that was one thing. I said, uh, I I like the African psychology, but how does that look in relation to the human body? And so I started stumbling upon that. Uh, Another direction I wanted African psychology to go in was to say more about the earth, again, in the abstract, the theorists would talk about, human nature, um, balance, and togetherness. But
Mhm.
what more might be said? And that's where those buildings come in that you talked about,
Mhm.
Dr. Lewis, right? So I wonder, when people are listening to this, what would they think when I say a mud building with a grass roof? What's the first thing that comes to our mind? A mud building with a grass roof. And I don't want us to think that that is everywhere on the African continent. You have metropolises, you have cities all across
Absolutely.
the African continent,
Absolutely.
right? And I don't necessarily want us to say, well, that means we're good either, or we're advanced. I don't necessarily want us to go there. I think that's a kind of trap and a mistake. But in some of the rural areas, you have building constructions on the model of how we do it indigenously,
Mhm.
mud-based structures with grass roofs. And I wonder what listeners will think, because I suspect we might think, oh man, I mean, maybe there's something cool about that, but it's something from a long time ago. It's something more primitive. It's something backward. I certainly wouldn't want to live in one of those. And, and,
Mm.
and I would wonder what the same listener would think about when I present the image of a so-called modern building, the kind of ones that you're in right now, that we're all in and that we know of, where your home is, that seem more kind of, I guess, stronger, permanent. They have no real visual connection to the earth from which all those materials came. You know, and so I wanted I wanted, with half connecting theory, to say more about the human relationship to the earth, because
Mm.
with half connecting theory, it's proposed that the kind of mud structure that I first talked about is something that was built by people who have a complementary or harmonious give and take relationship
With
with Mother Earth, right?
with
In
the
other words,
earth, yeah.
they were that mud structure is built in a way that it's taking material from the earth, building it up. But if at any point the people who live there want that structure to come down, it will come back to Mother Earth in a healthy give and take manner, right? That,
Mhm.
that, that strikes me as first of all, a cosmos people, a full connecting people, a people who know who they are and what they're supposed to be doing on Earth, versus that second kind of so-called modern building structure, which it's meant to take material from Mother Earth, build up in a way that can never really go back to the earth in a healthy manner. So that,
Mhm.
that suggests to me a psychology, not that
Mhm.
it, not it that psychology might think or trick itself into think it's going somewhere. Look at what I'm doing. But they're running from something, you know.
Yeah, it relates again to what you said earlier about believing that things that are good for
Yeah.
society are actually sometimes often not, right? Because if structures are built that take from the earth, but if they ever come down, right,
Mhm.
by forces of nature or man's behavior,
Yeah.
it doesn't go back to contribute to the earth. Yeah. Wow. And also, I was thinking about how often I've heard from people born on the continent of Africa when they share with me how sometimes they meet people who are born maybe in the West,
Mm.
and how these Westerners will ask them, "Do you live? Do you live in a hut? Do you have like buildings and things?" People who are unfamiliar with the
Yeah,
diversity of the continent of Africa.
yeah,
And listening to you talk just now, though, it's obvious that the question and even the reaction to the question sometimes is not appreciated because those earth earthly structures, they're not regarded as being as good
right.
on both sides, right?
Yeah,
Because the people are offended by the question, and the people who asking the question are being not only uninformed, but they're speaking in a way in which they think it's not as good. But the way you explained it just now,
yeah,
it's really like a more optimal way
yeah,
of coexisting with the earth.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's I
I
like
love that.
yeah, and my wife is from Ghana, and so
Hmm.
I'm a witness pretty
Yeah,
regularly to that question being asked, of
yeah,
her. Uh, but yeah, we are,
yeah, yeah.
it's a half connecting kind of question for someone to ask, to presume that these monumental structures that we've built up in an antagonistic relationship to nature, right? Things that, hey, I took it from you and I'm never giving it back, Mother Earth. That's going to stand up
Hmm.
forever. I got a concrete foundation and 1,000,
Hmm.
it's presumptuous to say the least,
Hmm.
for that question to be asked that way. But it's a half connecting phenomenon because for the, for,
Yeah.
for the person operating with a half connecting subconscious, and you'll know this from the article, it for that to happen, I have to subconsciously, of course, I'm being socialized like this, and then I just end up being like, "Dang, I'm a half connecting person. How'd that happen?" But subconsciously, what's happening is we are uh, we're, we're 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 obliterating, annihilating the other in
Hmm.
order for the self to stand out and stand up as an apparently autonomous and independent being. I mean, it's that kind of subconscious that leads to the hard handshake and to the staring and the I'm over here and you're over there and so forth, right? So that idea of obliterating or annihilating or rendering uh, the other into the value of a zero so that I can feel
Hmm.
like the one and only one, that's half
Yes.
connecting. And so when you apply that thought process to Mother Earth or to people who were living in a more balanced relationship with each other and the earth, then what you're doing essentially is you're reducing the value of those people and that kind of culture to a zero. It's meaningless to you. You see it as
Absolutely.
not only something backward, but it's something that almost from a patriotic perspective, I must annihilate that in order to keep feeling myself the way I feel myself, as an independent person.
Hmm. Yes.
Are we getting
Oh,
into it now?
okay. Yeah, no, this is really good. I appreciate all of, you
Absolutely.
know, you're giving me a lot that I can think about. And maybe even you might even get some more emails from me. Um,
Bring them on. Bring them on. I told you, you're my shining light. Keep shining the light.
thank you, thank you. Um, so I guess sort of as we're getting to the end of the time I wanted to keep you. What's a major takeaway that you aim for when someone reads about half connected theory, and how do you hope we will use it as your written contribution to Africana psychology?
Thank you for that. And when you say written, I want to let you know that if you want to do that writing talk, we can do that too. Okay. Um,
Yeah,
yeah. So, yeah,
that'll be my final question
absolutely.
for you.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I think in a general sense, what I want people to take away and consider is that we the things that we think of as developed and progress and inevitable
Mhm.
are in a very real sense a misrecognition of reality and psychological health, and that if we are reaching to grasp what life would be like to feel at peace with oneself and at
Mhm.
one with others in the world, then we need to uh, seriously consider that our many of our thoughts are misguided and intentionally so, that something has severed us from that which nourishes a healthy spirit, right, and a healthy
Mhm.
mind. Uh,
Mhm.
so again, just broadly speaking, I want someone to have to rethink that. You
Yes.
know, uh,
Yes. I think that's a great takeaway. Um, because I think just the way our lives are today, I, I'm almost certain there are people who might not be able to recall the last time they just spent time being reflective for restorative purposes in nature.
yes,
Those are things that I think, you know,
yeah. And with each other, and with each
yeah,
nature. We are
yeah.
nature. You know, we
Hmm.
are, we
Hmm.
are nature. Our bodies literally
Hmm.
biodegrade back into the earth, right? There's, I don't know if you've heard of this, but there's this thing going on where instead of burying or cremating, a, you know, a relative who has ascended, let me say, there's a
Hmm.
process of making their remains into diamonds. Have you heard of it? Yeah. In Europe, you can look it up. Anybody can Google it. And so, but what I'm saying is that's how earthly our bodies are. We are
Yeah.
literally nature, And so
Hmm.
it's. I just want to extend what you're saying and agree with it. When's the last
Yeah.
time our feet touch the earth, for example? When's the last time um, we got out there and listened, not with headphones on. Take the headphones off. When's the last time we listened to the birds and the
Hmm.
sound of the wind and the trees? But also us as almost like earth object. When's the last time we just were open with each other and didn't
Yeah.
mind just saying hi and inviting each other into conversation and knowing each other better?
Hmm.
I think
Yeah.
those are
I,
important.
a couple of years ago, when I was teaching Black psychology class at my university, um, within the first month, even though it was an 8 a.m. class, so I was a little nervous because I was like, they're gonna hate me. Um,
Mhm.
I took them out for a walk on the trail that's behind the university, and I did exactly that. I told them that you can't put your
Yeah,
headbuds in and your headphones, and when we finish, I'm gonna ask you, what did you notice? What did you hear? What did you
beautiful.
feel? And because it was 8 o'clock class, I don't think they appreciated it at first. But do you know like how much the energy changed by the time we were on the way back? They were
Right.
talking to each other, and
There it is, Dr.
it,
Lewis, right
it
there.
was yeah, it was
So
wonderful.
important.
Yeah, so what your theory is what we need, and I'm gonna go to the writing as my last question for you
Mhm,
that
mhm,
I will share with anyone listening that Dr. Watson shared with me off recording
mhm.
that um, he wasn't or isn't necessarily someone who wants to give us the impression that he loves everything about writing. Um, Yet he wrote this wonderful paper that I am such a fan. And so I'd like to ask, why should developing minds embrace writing? even if you don't particularly enjoy all aspects of it,
Mhm.
and even if you don't think you're the best at doing it,
Yeah.
what would you say to that?
Yeah, that's a fascinating question because, like you said, I don't have a straightforward "I love writing" perspective, but I also it's also not the opposite.
Mhm.
I alluded to it earlier that I have a particular relationship with writing, where for the first 17, 18 years of my life, I was running, not writing, so to speak. I was about the energy. I was about the social life. I was about the connection. I was about the rhythm, you know. And so I but when I get to college, by that time, I am ready to turn a corner and take the intellect uh, a little more seriously in terms of scholarship and so forth. So they put me in remedial reading and writing courses. I could write I think a grammatically correct sentence, but I didn't know how to connect sentences. I didn't know how to write paragraphs, distinguish paragraphs, anything. I was starting almost from scratch, which I think turned out to be an advantage in a way because as I um, pushed into writing, I was doing it based on spirit. In that video you had showed me, it said something about uh, it's am I afraid to write, or am I afraid that each and every word
Mhm.
I put down will be scrutinized or criticized?
Mhm.
I wasn't, because
Mhm.
I wasn't writing words. I was translating my movement and my spirit into the written word. And so, you, if you're criticizing my writing, you're criticizing my spirit. You could
Ah.
yeah, you can mess with the individual words. I don't mind,
Mhm.
but don't mess with my spirit. And so
Yeah.
that's my relationship to writing. It doesn't come from a place of the brain or the intellect or pure rationality. It's coming from a deeper place. you know
Mhm.
it's coming from that rhythm. It's coming from that spirit. It's coming from the vibrations, and those things represent to me my culture, my elders, my ancestors, and therefore when I'm writing, I feel like I have 1,000 ancestors behind me writing,
Yes.
you know?
Mhm.
So by the time I get to writing, if I'm writing about those things that have to do with us, our
Mhm.
people, our condition, our beauty, and how we're going to extract ourselves from these conditions,
Mhm.
it's so much more than writing by that point. It's so much
Wow.
more than writing. And so, but what that means is I can write every day, all day about those critically important things. But if you're asking me to write about something else or even read about something that there's not a clear connection to that purpose, I,
Mhm.
I don't have to do that. I don't have to do that.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That's beautiful. I like how you put that,
Thank you.
right? Because you're taking away the colonial view of writing in academia,
Yeah,
and replacing it with spirit infused, spiritually motivated output,
yeah.
right?
I
Your
think so.
inner self coming onto the screen or
Yeah, absolutely.
paper.
And
Yes.
I'll get people, and you need these people. Like, I'll get people to look at my writing and then try to, you know, edit the words into formats that are quote unquote acceptable
Mhm.
in the current way that academics write, and I don't mind that. Like I said, just don't touch my being, don't touch my spirit. And so then
Hmm.
people will help me get it into those quote unquote proper formats, and
Yeah.
I can live with that, no problem.
Yeah. Okay.
Mhm.
Wow. This I'm going to probably watch this a couple of times
Okay.
and
Will I get a copy?
make sure you have a copy, of
Thank you.
course.
I would like
Of
to.
course. Of course. Um, and yeah, I think we can wrap up here, but I could have talked to you for, on and on and on.
Thank
And I want to thank you again for even agreeing to do this with me. And it happened when it was supposed to happen, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Why not?
So
That's what we're here for. Full connect.
that's right.
We're here.
That's right.
You
That's
call, I'll
right.
respond. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, Dr. Marcus Watson, creator of the half connected theory and one of my favorite papers that I've read in recent times. So I want to thank you so much for this time and you enjoy your weekend.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. One of my shining lights. It's all love. Okay. I love us all forever. Thank you for doing this. Absolutely.
All right.
Big
All
hug.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Take it.